The anime begins by showing a nobleman traveling through a Kidween forest with several children. Unfortunately, that night while the nobleman and the children were resting in the middle of the forest, some very fierce monsters suddenly appeared and attacked them all. The situation became even tenser as the savage monsters slaughtered the noblemen and children on the carriage. Fortunately, one of the boys named Sugo managed to escape the beast's attack for a while. After running far enough, Sugo saw a dashing man named Vesemir fighting against a monster named Leshen. Leshen is a very savage forest monster and has a strong desire to kill humans. Vesemir, the Witcher, is tasked with hunting down the monsters and killing them so that all residents in the village can be protected. Every Witcher who manages to catch and kill a monster will be rewarded with gold from the nobles they rescued. After a fairly fierce battle, Vesemir defeated the monster with his magic power and sword skills. Before the monster died, Leshen had said a few sentences in the ancient elven language that made Vesemir think someone had controlled the monster. After killing the monster, Vesemir took money from Sugo's dead father and left the place. Sugo tries to chase after Vesemir and asks him for help, but Vesemir chooses to ignore him. Vesemir even asked Sugo to wait while putting on a pitiful face so that someone would feel sorry for him and be willing to help him. A female witch named Tetra Girlcrest, who heard the story, calmed him down and asked him not to worry because she would take care of the bodies of Sugo's father and brothers. Tetra promises to pay due respect and bury Sugo's family well. After rescuing Sugo, Tetra sees the King of Dagreed and suggests that the Witchers in Kaer Morhen's territory be exiled. She guessed the recent monster attacks were caused by the Witchers in that place. She thinks that the Witchers just want to scare the residents of the Kidween area so they can take money from the residents. But the accusation was denied by an old woman named Lady Zerbst, who had been a royal advisor for many years. She asks Tetra to show evidence of all these accusations because the Witcher they have known so far does have a noble purpose of protecting the residents from monsters. King Dagreed, who heard this, agreed with Lady Zerbst's words and kept the Witcher on patrol until they could find concrete evidence of the accusation. On the other hand, a male elf named Filavandrel came to visit Vesemir, who was relaxing at his house. Vesemir then told Filavandrel about the words previously mentioned by the monster Leshen whom he had previously defeated in the forest. Filavandrel then told him the meaning of the words spoken by the monster Leshen, but Vesemir still couldn't understand the meaning of the Leshen monster's words. Filavandrel then told about his purpose of coming to Vesemir's place, namely to ask him for help to find someone. Filavandrel then says that many elf girls have suddenly disappeared over the past few years from his territory. One of the elven girls who disappeared was a girl named Kitsu, a talented magician who understood the ancient elven language. Filavandrel asked Vesemir to help him find out where Kitsu was, but he refused the request because the task did not benefit him. The scene switches to the past when Vesemir was a teenager and worked as a servant for one of the noble families in his hometown. One day, the wife of a noble family that Vesemir served suddenly screamed hysterically because she had been possessed by a demon. The master, who became his employer, asked Vesemir to look for herbal medicines in the market and make some potions. When Vesemir was about to buy some medicinal ingredients, he met a girl who worked as a servant for a noble family. The girl named Ilyana had known him since they were children, and they had become close friends. Vesemir then told about his frustration over the life he was living then and his intention to leave the city to explore. He did not want to continue living as a slave and had a strong ambition to become a successful person in the future. Hearing this, Ilyana told about her dream to Vesemir, namely enjoying a wonderful lake view with her future husband. After that, Vesemir and Ilyana rushed to the market to buy some herbal medicine and cakes. However, because they did not have enough money, Vesemir invited Ilyana to steal some cakes from the market traders. Even after they managed to steal a few slices of cake, they stole the herbal medicines to save the money they had previously received from their master. When Vesemir and Ilyana were enjoying their cake in a narrow alley, a burly man named Daglin, who worked as the Witcher, approached them. Daglin deliberately came to the city after he heard the news about a woman who was possessed by a demon. Daglin asks Vesemir to take him to the woman's house, and if Vesemir refuses, he will report Vesemir's theft to his employer. When Daglin and Vesemir arrived at his employer's house, Daglin carried out a ritual to expel demons from the woman's body. After diagnosing that she had been possessed by a demon of the Mar type, Daglin then spread the potion powder around her bed to trap the demon. After everything was ready, Daglin asked everyone to leave the room except Vesemir, who would be assigned to catch the demon that came out of the woman's body. After chanting some incantations and starting the ritual, the woman began to show a reaction, and a demon in the form of a black spider suddenly emerged from her body. Daglin ordered Vesemir to capture and kill the demon, but after the spider demon transformed into Ilyana, Vesemir hesitated to kill it. Fortunately, before the demon could attack Vesemir, Daglin had already killed the demon by thrusting a spear into its chest. After Daglin's work was finished, Vesemir saw the large number of gold coins Daglin received from the nobles who had been helped by him and became interested in his work. Vesemir asks permission from Daglan to join him so that he can become the Witcher like him. But for some reason, Daglan refused his request and threw some gold coins to Vesemir as a reward for his help before Daglan finally left the city. The next day, Vesemir told Ilyana about what he had previously seen from Daglan. He intends to become a Witcher like Daglan to earn more money and not continue to live as a slave. Hearing this, Ilyana asked him to be more grateful for their current situation. She thought their situation in that city was much safer, but if they went to another city to try their luck, their safety would never be guaranteed. The situation out there is too dangerous and risky for people like those who have no family or home at all. But Vesemir still wants to fight to become the Witcher because the pay of a Witcher is far more than a slave like them. Hearing that Vesemir was too stubborn, Ilyana scolded him not to go anywhere and then headed back to her dormitory. That night, when everyone had fallen asleep, Vesemir quietly slipped away after he left a cake under Ilyana's bed as a sign of farewell. Afterward, he walked towards the forest and passed through a very cold blizzard to go to Kaer Morhen's territory. After a long journey, Vesemir finally arrives at a secret academy called the School of the Wolf, an academy that trains children in their teens to become the Witcher. At the academy, Vesemir meets young boys the same age as him, such as Luca and Sven. Actually, not all children become students at the academy voluntarily. Some of them are forced to undergo training at the academy because their parents can't afford the Witcher's services. This phenomenon is called the Law of Surprise, where when someone who has hired the Witcher's services cannot pay the Witcher's wages, they have to give up their child instead. One of the children who became victims of this phenomenon was a boy named Thomas. When Vesemir saw Thomas crying in fear, he approached him and tried to calm him down. When Vesemir asked what was bothering him, Thomas replied that he was afraid to go through the trial of the grasses process. This process is a ritual that every academy student must go through to become a person who is stronger than the average person. In the process, each child will be immersed in a poison liquid consisting of a combination of secret herbs and poison infusions to awaken their superhuman strength. So far, only a few children have survived the trial process, and only the strongest children have survived to become the Witcher. The next night after Vesemir and all the children were immersed in a poisonous potion in the Red Swamp, each would receive a necklace that would vibrate when monsters were around them. The process is called the Trial of the Forest, where all children who can survive the dangerous poison will be tested to survive in a swamp full of dangerous monsters for several days. Shortly after, several vicious monsters emerged from within the swamp and attacked everyone, including Vesemir. All the children were forcibly pulled by the monsters before they were finally torn apart by the beasts blindly. Thomas and several other children had been killed by the attacks of these monsters, while Vesemir and the few children who were still able to survive immediately ran as fast as possible in pursuit of the ferocious monster. A few days later, Vesemir finally woke up in the academy dormitory after undergoing treatment for several days. Even though he was seriously injured, he survived the monster attack in the Red Swamp the other day. After Vesemir came to his senses, he saw several necklaces belonging to several academy students hanging on the academy hall tree. The necklaces belonged to children who didn't survive the trial of the forest and were killed by monsters. After taking one of the necklaces from the tree, Vesemir walked to the basement area and found a laboratory room managed by a male magician named Raderich. Raderich is a scientist who makes various poison potions that will later be used to turn someone into the Witcher. Any Witcher who could endure all those poison potions wouldn't age like normal humans and would still be strong young humans as they grew older. All of this is caused by a genetic mutation in each Witcher's body. Shortly after, Daglan appears and asks Raderich not to divulge all the secrets about the Witcher to Vesemir. After learning that many children died in the trial process, Vesemir scolded Daglan for not trying to save the children who had been attacked by the monsters in the Red Swamp. Daglan then explains that it's all part of the Witcher recruitment process. Most students will die during the trial process, and only the strongest can survive to become the Witcher. A few days later, Vesemir received a letter from Ilyana saying that the noble family that had previously been his master had been killed by a monster attack. Fortunately, Ilyana managed to escape from the place safely and has been very well cared for by other noble families in Kaedwein. She lives a much more peaceful and prosperous life than before. Therefore, she hopes that Vesemir also lives a better life and asks him not to worry about her anymore. The following night, Vesemir and the few surviving children return to the final stage of the trial of the grasses. They will drink various deadly poison potions prepared by Raderich so that the mutation process in their bodies can begin and their bodies turn into superhumans. After going through a long and painful process, 4 of the 10 children who went through the deadly trial were finally able to turn into a mutant with extraordinary sensory abilities. In addition to experiencing physiological changes where all their reflex movements become faster and age increases, their eyes will turn into cat eyes that can see all things very sharply. Unfortunately, after going through all these processes, every child who manages to become the Witcher will lose their emotions and empathy as a human. That's why many witches tend to have no feelings or humanity toward other people. After Vesemir grew into a very strong Witcher, he began to take on his role and hunt as many monsters as possible to earn a lot of money. The scene back to the present. Vesemir, who has just completed a mission, meets Sven and Luca in Kaer Morhen. At that time, Sven gathered street children they would later recruit as Witcher at the school of the Wolf Academy. Considering that recently, the number of monsters that have sprung up in the area has been increasing while the number of members of the Witcher is still very small. In the evening, Vesemir meets with Daglin, who tells him about Tetra's propaganda to get rid of the Witchers. Daglin deliberately invites Vesemir to ask him for help in training the children they will recruit as the Witcher. Initially, Vesemir objected to training the children because he really did not like children. However, because Daglin forced him, he was forced to train the children with some sword fighting exercises. Vesemir, annoyed with the attitude of the constantly lazy children, immediately scolded them all and said that training was very important for them to survive in the outside world. The next night, when Vesemir and Luca were bored waiting for the children undergoing a trial of the Grasses training, they decided to go to a bar and have some fun. When Vesemir and Luca were telling the girls about the work of the Witcher, a knight at the bar suddenly felt disturbed by the story. The annoyed Luca mocked the knight, and it caused a fight between them. The conflict between the two heated up. As a result, Luca and Vesemir killed the knight mercilessly. After the incident was discovered by the royal guards, Luca and Vesemir were detained in the palace prison. After the news of the murders committed by the Witcher was known by the royal members, Tetra advised the king of Dagrid to execute the two Witchers. But Lady Zerbst again opposes Tetra's advice because it can trigger a war between the Witcher and ordinary humans. There had been a heated debate between Tetra and Lady Zerbst in addressing this case, but the king of Dagrid finally decided to send the two Witchers into the forest to eradicate the monsters that had recently been troubling the townspeople. That night after the king's decision had been made, Lady Zerbst went to the palace prison to convey the monster hunting mission to Vesemir in person. When Lady Zerbst met Vesemir, she revealed that she was Ilyana, who had been his best friend. Lady Zerbst had married a nobleman named Zerbst and had several children. Ilyana has lived a long life and has aged, while Vesemir still looks so young because of his genetic mutation. Lady Zerbst then tells Vesemir that the kingdom will free him and Luca if he can eradicate the monsters in the forest. In carrying out the monster hunt this time, Vesemir will be accompanied by Tetra, a pure royal mage. The next day, Vesemir and Tetra began to travel into the forest for several days. At that time, Tetra told Vesemir about a Witcher who once helped a priest who was very ill. The Witcher believed that the priest's illness was caused by a curse from a witch and that the curse could only disappear when the witch was killed. And after the Witcher killed the witch, the priestess slowly started to get better and gave the Witcher some gems as payment. But a few days later, the priest saw that his chef had the same gem he had given the Witcher. It was later discovered that the illness the priest suffered was not a curse from the magician but a disease caused by poison that had been included by the chef in the priest's food. The chef works with the Witcher to poison the priest so they can get gems as payment and share the fee's proceeds. That's what makes Tetra hate the Witcher so much. They have the heart to do anything and sacrifice others to get abundant wealth. After that, as they continued their journey into the middle of the forest, they were suddenly trapped in an illusory world created by someone. Luckily, Tetra knows a special spell that can free them both from the illusory world. Not long after they had walked quite a distance, Vesemir and Tetra met Kitsu, a female elf whom Filavandrel had previously been looking for. Kitsu said the same sentence Vesemir had heard from the monster Leshen he had defeated, and it made him believe that the mastermind behind the monster terror that had occurred so far was her. Currently, Kitsu has mutated into a monster who can create an illusion and summon a legendary monster called the Basilisk. Vesemir and Tetra began to attack the Basilisk monster together to ensure that it wasn't just an illusion. Unfortunately, the power possessed by the Basilisk was so great that even though it had been attacked by two people at once, the monster was still able to rise. Fortunately, Tetra managed to trap the Basilisk monster in ice magic to restrict the Basilisk's movement so Vesemir could use the opportunity to burn the monster. As a result, after a fairly fierce and dangerous battle, Tetra and Vesemir could finally destroy the Basilisk monster. Unfortunately, Kitsu had already fled after she turned into a red fox. Vesemir tries to injure Kitsu by throwing a knife at her, but she can still escape. Even so, Vesemir and Tetra can still follow in Kitsu's footsteps and arrive at an elven school that has been abandoned for a long time. After investigating several rooms, they found the bodies of several elf girls who had been missing. After investigating further, Vesemir and Tetra met Filavandrel, who had been held hostage by Kitsu. Filavandrel then told them that Kitsu had collected many female elves to serve as experimental objects so that she could turn the elves into strong monsters like her. It turns out, Kitsu has been mutated using Mars poison, the same poison used to turn humans into the Witcher. Tetra concludes that there is an element of the Witcher who has kidnapped Kitsu and turned her into a monster so that the Witcher can get a lot of coins. But Vesemir denied it and said that he never knew anything about it. When a mutated young elf girl suddenly appears, Tetra prepares to kill the elf girl. However, the action was prevented by Filavandrel, who said he would care for and watch over the elf girl. Even if the elf girl turned into a monster like Kitsu, he would execute her directly. After learning about the truth, Vesemir rushed to meet Daglin to find out what really happened to the elves. Meanwhile, Tetra destroys Kitsu's entire laboratory and begins to search for the location of Kitsu's whereabouts. The news about the experiments carried out by the Witcher on the elven girl had spread and was known to the king of Dagreed, so he ordered the guards to execute Luca, who was still in the royal palace. Lady Zerbst, who saw it, tried to stop the execution, but she couldn't do much because all the evidence of the experiment had been found. On the other hand, Vesemir, who went to meet Daglin, finally found out that all this time, Daglin had been conducting experiments to turn the elves into monsters. All he does is so that the monsters continue to appear, and the Witcher can get more missions and a lot of money. Hearing this, Vesemir was very angry and asked Daglin to stop all these experiments because it was very dangerous for the elves. Because he rejected Vesemir's suggestion, the fight between them was unavoidable. However, the fight was immediately stopped when Lady Zerbst came to the base and informed about the plans of Tetra and the residents to kill all the Witchers. Seeing the increasingly chaotic situation, Vesemir tried to negotiate with Tetra and said that the artificial monster no longer existed. However, Tetra, fed up with the Witcher's greed, chooses to keep attacking the Witchers. She then opens several portals that release ferocious monsters controlled by Kitsu. Previously, Tetra had lied to Kitsu by saying that the person who had set fire to Kitsu's base and killed the elf girl in the base was Daglin. As a result, the Witcher must fight against Kitsu's savage monsters and the humans eager to kill them. Daglin, Vesemir, and the other members of the Witcher cast magic power and use all their abilities to deal with attacks from enemies. While the villagers and the Witcher were fighting, Lady Zerbst gathered all the village children and secured them in the basement. One of the boys noticed the unsafe situation and told her to let them out by a secret passage in the barn. Lady Zerbst asked the boy to lead the other children to escape from the place through the secret passage while she stayed behind to stop Tetra. Unfortunately, not long after that, Tetra captured Lady Zerbst and Raderich. Meanwhile, Vesemir must face off again with Kitsu, who traps him in an illusory world where he sees Ilyana drowning in a pile of gold coins, indirectly describing his greed. Vesemir saw an illusion about him having deceived a priest and shared the results of the trick with a chef. In the last illusion, he saw himself, who had married Ilyana and had a son. After he was freed from Kitsu's illusion, Vesemir killed Tetra's men before finally fighting fiercely against Tetra. After a long and tense fight, Vesemir finally decapitated Tetra and killed Kitsu by stabbing his sword into her body. But apparently, it was all still part of the illusion created by Kitsu, and the person Vesemir had killed earlier was Raderich. The person who previously thought Vesemir to be Kitsu was Ilyana, who was dying from Vesemir's sword stab wound. After that, Tetra attacked Vesemir from behind while telling him that the mage he had killed was her mother. Fortunately, before Tetra killed Vesemir with her arrows, the dying Daglin managed to kill her first using his axe. Before Daglin exhales his last breath, he tells Vesemir to save the remaining children and educate them to become wiser Witcher. After saving the children, Vesemir saw Kitsu, who was still alive as a fox, but instead of attacking her, he chose to save Ilyana from that place. After that, Vesemir took Ilyana to a beautiful lake she had dreamed of since childhood. In his arms, she reveals that she once dreamed of marrying him and living in a simple house near the lake. Shortly after saying those words, Ilyana died in his arms, and Vesemir could only cry seeing the departure of the person he loved so much. After that, Vesemir met the surviving children and gave them the option of becoming the Witcher. All the children seemed hesitant to accept the offer, but a bald-headed boy chose to accept Vesemir's invitation and chose his destiny as the Witcher. That boy was Geralt of Livia, someone who would grow up as a brave young man and legendary Witcher. The moral that can be learned from this anime is that going all out and sacrificing innocent people for personal greed will only put us in a sad ending.